Hello and good afternoon, everybody. This is Dominic Zerlo with the New Mexico Department of Health, and this is the Propagation Committee meeting. And we have started the meeting, and just as a reminder, we do record these meetings. It does take a minute or so for everybody who is in the waiting room to get admitted, so we'll start in just a moment. In the meantime, because we are recording the meetings, please remember to watch your language. We do want to be able to post these onto the system, and if there is inappropriate language, it does actually delay our being able to post it, as it has to be gone through and the inappropriate language bleeped. It is also part of the reason why we do not have cameras on, uh, because sometimes there has in the past in other meetings, thankfully not with this program, but in other programs or at other times, where inappropriate things are occurring in the background. And so we want to again make sure that we are able to share this publicly. And so we do that. The other reason why we do not have everybody with cameras on is also because since there are some areas of the state that do have um, internet issues at times, by not having cameras on, it helps reduce the bandwidth and ensures that they're able to stay on for, well, or at least have fewer issues and able to stay on as much as possible. And so with that, thank you again, everybody. For those who were still joining in, I'm Dominic Zerlo, and this is the Propagation Committee for the Medical Psilocybin program. And the chair on this is Chris Peskuski. And so, Chris, I will turn it on over to you.
Thank you, as always, Dominic. You're amazing. And um, for most of you, know that I like to start these sessions off with just a 30-second reflection of trying to create a small container of peace in a world full of chaos. So we'll begin with that. All right. Thank you, everybody, for bearing with me on that. I think it's important for us all to find center, remember why we're here for this process. And I'm very grateful to all of you that have shown up repeatedly. And I think I see a few new names on here today. So I'm grateful for those of you who are first timers as well. Um, can we post the agenda, Dominic?
It should be showing up in just a moment.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. There we go. Agenda. And I'll put it in the chat as well.
Excellent.
Okay. And can you see it, Chris?
I
Just to
can
make
see it
sure.
today. Hopefully I can see the outline.
Fantastic.
All right. So as always, this is flexible. We're going to talk about what we need to, but we're going to do some introductions here in a second. I kind of jumped ahead, obviously. And then there's a few topics we need to readdress, some from last time that we need to bring back up. And then we're going to continue with the propagation outline. And so this is a big meeting because I have to submit a first draft to the advisory board here in a couple days. We will have another meeting next week to maybe polish some things up. But for the most part, whatever we put out in this meeting will be the product that we deliver to the advisory board for their meeting on the 27th. So with that, we'll go ahead and go into introductions. I want to remind everybody that, if we vote on something, you will have had to introduce yourself to have a vote. And when we do introductions, just tell us your name, where you're from, and please let us know if you have any affiliations with businesses or other organizations in this space. And yeah, let's go ahead and go to that.
Just a reminder to everyone, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand and we can unmute you. And yeah. First, we have Manuel. Manuel, I've allowed your mic. Please unmute and begin when ready.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Manuel Griego. I go by Manny. I am from Albuquerque, born and raised here in New Mexico, and I have no affiliations with any organizations. I'm just here to help in any way I can and learn more about what's going on in this industry and what's going to be happening. So thank you guys for having me. Thanks for hosting us.
Thank you very much for that. Next, we have Mateo. Mateo, I've enabled your mic. Please unmute when ready.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Mateo Fraser, Okewenge, New Mexico. I was in behavioral health for many years, and I'm also a vice licensee in the New Mexico cannabis program. Glad to be here. Thanks for hosting the meeting.
Thank you very much for sharing. Next, we have Ash Shelton. Ash, I have enabled your microphone. Please begin when ready.
Hi, I am Ash Shelton. I was born and raised in New Mexico. I am currently the manager of Four Corners Fungi, and I'm also on the board of the New Mexico Mycology Guild.
Thank you very much for sharing. If anyone else wishes to speak, please do raise your hands and I will enable your microphone. Instructions on how to unmute yourself once your microphone has been enabled are available on the screen. Thank you, Dominic, for sharing those. Next, we have James Brown. James, I have enabled your mic. Please unmute when ready.
Afternoon, everyone. And again, Chris, thank you for being the chair of this. My name is James Brown. I'm a doctor of pharmacy from New Mexico here. I'm a veteran. I'm disabled. Also, basically, I'm just representing a nonprofit group called 5 Degrees North Healing Foundation, which represents veterans, first responders, trauma, and we'll be looking to get a center license to offer those services here in New Mexico. Again, thank you for allowing me to be part of this and look forward to today.
Thank you very much. Again, if anyone else wishes to speak, please do raise your hand and I will unmute accordingly. In the meantime, it seems we have no more hands up. So back to you, Chris. Oh, no, pardon me. We do have a hand up there. I have enabled your mic, please. Chavez, is that how you pronounce that? My apologies if I've got that wrong. Do let me know.
Yes, that's correct. Most people know me by Chevy. I'm a teacher at the Native Roots School. I teach a magic mushroom medicine class through the Native Roots School out of Taos. I live in Cuesta. I am a psychedelic mycologist. I published a manual on bulk cultivation of psilocybe, and I treat my cluster headaches with psilocybin.
Thank you very much for sharing that. We really appreciate that. I believe that concludes all the hands that are up, Chris. So back to you.
So we need at least one more person per our bylaws to have a quorum in this space. So please.
It seems we have that. We have Gregory Evans with their hand up. So Gregory, I have enabled your microphone. Please begin when ready. Oh, pardon me. Before you go, as Dominic.
No, I was just going to say Greg had introduced himself in the chat and was off mic, but go.
Fantastic.
The off mic introduction will suffice. I'm trying to stay quiet for a minute.
Thank you very much. And yes, if you wish to see his introduction, it's in the chat there. So yeah, I think that concludes them all. And I pass back to you, Chris.
Thank you very much. All right. So Dominic reviewed the sunset clause with the legal team, and unfortunately, there's an issue with that. The legal team has said that due to interstate commerce laws, that the sunset clause we have written up cannot be part of our program. But I think he's got a workaround on that. Dominic, do you want to report on what you think we might be able to do instead?
Yeah, so what we had talked about, and just so everybody knows, and Chris, you summed that up very well, is that, and we ran into this same issue with regard to cannabis and in some other areas, as I was talking with our legal folks on it, is, and some of you may remember I had said that I had concerns that we might not be able to do it due to commerce clauses. And that's because interstate commerce is actually regulated by Congress, not at the state level, as far as, being able to have businesses in different states and things like that. And so what I'm sort of recommending, and what I kind of talked with our legal team about, is, well, we can't actually stop individuals who are from out of state from coming in and establishing a business. We were saying that we can put that into the hands of the individuals who are in various businesses and do a statement, require that they have a statement on the product information document that says, and I'm putting this into the chat just to make it easier for most people to read, that has a statement regarding the number of years the business has been established in New Mexico, and a statement declaring the state and country of residence, including length of time of their primary investors. That way, individuals would be able to make a determination on it being a New Mexico established business and how long, or if it is from other locations, and then make their decision through that sort of a process, if that makes sense. And so I think, Chris, if you're okay with it, are there any comments with regard to this? And if people would like to raise their hand, of course, we can take those. And of course, we'll give a moment for people to read it. So I'll continue talking for a moment to give people a chance to read it.
I think some of the people that may have, really have a big stake in this may not be on the meeting yet. So I'm wondering if we shouldn't maybe shelve it to the back half of the meeting and move on. Would that be okay to readdress it as some other people maybe trickle in?
Yes, we actually can, because that is actually a part of the labeling requirements where we would put that. So we could go and look through some of the other aspects and then come back to that section. And I'd have no issues with that at all. Just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of this issue from a legal standpoint. So.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and table that for now, and hopefully some of our players come later. Let's move on to the, can you pull up the propagation outline for us, please, Dominic?
Yeah, I am working on that right now, sir. Give me just a moment. My system is deciding, of course, that now that I need it, it's telling me that it's not available, but I'll get it in just a moment.
So I think our next issue is going to be dealing with the where is it? The testing authority, and we ended on that we were going to allow both Department of Health or the existing testing laboratories to submit process for SOPs and IDCs to the Department of Health. Basically the same pathway that cannabis testing is done. We're going to allow that and a third-party testing, but there was a question on whether we should have one third-party testing or the other. And Greg did a deep dive on that. Greg, would you like to talk about what you found during that time?
Yeah, I can do that. Give me one sec. Sorry, I've got a multitasking day here. Is this mic working? Can anybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool, thanks. Chris, can you get me started on this? Like, what are our main questions?
So essentially, the only question is if we're going to allow a third-party testing. The question is, should we restrict it to one or the other? NELAC or ISO certification for the labs. So,
Okay. Yeah.
and we can do both too. There's nothing that restricts us from doing both.
So I mean, like, just trying to keep it super high level and as simple as possible. NELAC TNI is way out of scope for what we're doing, in the effort of regulating less, allowing more access, creating a market that can stabilize itself. The ISO IEC is essentially like the primary governing body, and then you have a private agency that offers its services to a company for $2,000 to $10,000 to say that you now are blessed by the ISO guidelines. There are no real companies that do that for psilocybin yet. Emerald out of Colorado failed, so they cannot provide that service. There's a company called A2LA out of Maryland or California that like might be on the verge of getting that. I see Dan has a comment. But the NELAC is essentially just another third-party system that layers in a bunch of agricultural stuff that we don't really need. My recommendation would be go to either have ISO as the requirement or postpone that as a requirement until the infrastructure exists to offer that. During that tiered rollout, I would like to know if the Department of Health or another agency inside like our state organization can shoulder the requirements. So to have the SOPs, they could, hire somebody to come in as a contractor under the grant to say, hey, these are the SOPs, and essentially provide the same level of service that the ISO guidelines would without that $10,000 expense to the individual companies. And then a few years into the program, we could shift to private accreditation companies giving ISO certification, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so in the last meeting, we already determined that DOH, what they're doing with cannabis is certifying the laboratories that roll out the cannabis program. So we determined that that would be one of the options, is they would already do that. So there's not going to be a tiered rollout as far as these recommendations are concerned. So that both options would be viable as a lab accreditation.
Well, I think what I'm saying is, like, in a perfect world down the road, when the infrastructure exists, I think ISO IEC is what we should have as a standard for a medical system. But having the state do it currently seems like the best move today.
Okay.
I will yield.
As far as the regulations, though, like, we already voted that it would be two options. So, and that does bring up a good point, though, is
there's no one to do the ISO.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Just a quick point, we have a hand up. Yeah.
Dan, go ahead.
Hi, Daniel Houston, Rose City Laboratories, psilocybin testing, Portland, Oregon. Just wanted to touch base a little bit. There may be a little bit of confusion, I'm not sure, but when it comes to third-party accreditors that will accredit under ISO, yes, A2LA is one of them. And actually, I've talked with a different agency, but it's similar to the A2LA, and they don't really care what you're getting accredited for, as long as you got the paperwork and the validation of the equipment or whatever they're asking for is in place. So they will do you for psilocybin, they'll do anything. They don't really care. It's just money in their pocket. But yes, it is expensive. Same thing with TNI and NELAC. There is third parties that will accredit for that. I'm not sure if you guys have labs in New Mexico that are accredited under that. But they don't also care really what they're going to go accredit you for, as long as you got the paperwork and everything they're asking for. NELAC TNI is just a little bit extra hard work because you just have to submit your SOPs and everything. The NELAC, TNI, NELAC, and then TNI will accredit you from that. But anyway, and then when it comes to the PTs, that's where Emerald, had a kind of a system, and the PT is in like button mushrooms that is spiked with psilocybin and psilocin, and then you analyze it that way. But when you do that, you don't have the natural interferences of the baeocystines and norbaeocystines, psilocin, all the other compounds and other elements in there. You don't have those interferences when you deal with the button mushroom. So there really is truly no good way to do a PT, but that is better. I mean, I think they still have that. Emerald was just a third party reseller of PTs and standards and all of that. So you can actually go to the manufacturer of the PT and get it from them directly. We've actually did that once just to see. And so it is available, but it's just not the best, but it's better than not providing or participating in a PT. I thought last time that when you guys talked about it, you were going to allow all options. You could either do the state program or TNI, NELAC, or via ISO. And I still believe you should allow either or, and it could be ors, but something, the state or NELAC or TNI or ISO. Sorry. Is there anything else? That's it.
Yeah, I think I kind of brought that question up at the last minute and opened this can of worms. But I also think that maybe there should be a recommendation to have all labs participate in a round robin, given a set sample, or a set homogenized sample, and that way we can validate the results of all the labs that we have currently testing, assuming we have more than one. Does anybody have any comment on that or ideas how we can go ahead, Dan?
So just really quick, the round robin is going to be tough if you don't have more than one laboratory in the state. And if you do have other laboratories that maybe are not going to be licensed, if you would allow them to go ahead and participate in a round robin, that's all good and fine and dandy. But if you try to participate in round robins with labs outside of the state, then everybody gets the hairs on the back of their head standing up going, oh, it's not really legal, and I don't want to get busted and all of that. So there's that worry. I personally believe as long as it's for science and validating from one lab to another lab, I don't think anybody cares. Plus, the federal government is encouraging more additional research and science and blah, blah, blah. So round robin is tough if you just do just a round robin, or, there should be a round robin or a PT or something. Just FYI.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Hopefully we can get more than one lab going in New Mexico. And if they can't, Dominic, can the state lab act as a secondary source where we could do verifications? And you also have a comment.
Thank you, Chris. And actually my comment was, I had it in my notes, but it apparently didn't make it into the document that we were displaying, so I just transferred it over, which does include and have the item of that the department can require samples to be conducted by additional labs for validation purposes, which is that whole idea of the round robin, doing the validation. And then as far as for the state lab, they would of course have to get up to speed on it, But we did do that for many years with regard to cannabis. And that's where once they are up to speed and being able to do this sort of thing, we could potentially be utilizing them as well. So, and that would still fall just under that statement that I added about the department can require samples to be conducted by additional labs for validation purposes. And I'll put that in the chat so people can just see it. And again, the language is going to get refined a little bit, but as the actual regulations themselves are developed, but that's the essential purpose would be to make sure that validation is occurring. And so that it's not just one lab that is doing this and that we have a reference laboratory. And the reference laboratory is most often the state lab.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments on this? Does anybody see any reason to restrict to one or the other ISO or NELAC verification? Okay, I'm gonna look for consensus here that we leave it open to going through the state program, submitting the SOPs, which we already did, and so I apologize. And we have ISO or NELAC as optional third-party accreditation labs. So does anybody opposed to those? Go ahead, Greg. Do you have a comment, or are you raising your hand because you're opposed?
No, just a quick question. I didn't realize. I just want to sanity check why we want to include ISO and NELAC in the recommendation if it's going to be like state level. Like, what's the purpose of adding those? I think is my question.
I think first of all, it gives laboratories options, or it gives laboratories options for who they want to work with and go through. If they're already ISO certified for another process, then they can add that process to their psilocybin body and not have to go through the state program. So it gives options to the laboratories, which I think we need to make that process as easy as possible, to try to have as many as we can get in the state. Does that answer your question, Greg?
No, but if ISO certification is not a requirement, like they're free to do whatever they want.
So there needs to be an accreditation through something, and it can be either the state or a third-party accreditation.
Right. And if I may, this is Dominic. And so what we're saying is that even the current existing labs have actually already gone through a pathway that includes evaluation, site visits, all of that. So we're just saying that that can still happen under existing situation through the program, or they can go through and do the ISO or NELAC accreditation. They would still have to apply, of course. Or then, of course, the other side was the labs approved or overseen by the department, which includes the state lab. So it gives the multiple pathways, but regardless of which way they do it, they do have to have an evaluation. They have to submit their plans or SOPs, all those sort of things.
Is there another comment on this? I'm splitting screens because I can't see the outline again, so I can't see who's got their hand raised.
We have James Brown.
Go ahead, James.
Hey, Chris, I just had one comment here to kind of open up that spirit of, of enterprise across New Mexico, right? The word existing is tough. Like if somebody comes in as a new lab, if they were able to apply through the state program, would that be existing word exclude those people? I just want to make sure if, so if somebody could come in new and then they could apply through the state way, they could apply through the ISO way, or they could apply through 3 pathways. But the word existing limits anybody new coming in that New Mexico application pathway. I feel. I mean, do we feel like we need to say existing and new? Or I just want to make sure that that is right there. That's going to be okay. Thank you.
That's a good point, James. Do we need to take
Um,
out the existing cannabis testing and just put
So,
laboratories? Go ahead.
so what I've actually just done is, because it's just a wording on that, and that's a great point on it, James. So thank you on that. So what I've just changed that to is cannabis testing laboratories which have been approved. That way it would be any that are current and or in the future would be approved.
Okay.
So that was
And
a
so-
great point. Thank you, James.
Yeah, good point. Okay, and so the final question is, and the labs overseen or approved by the department that's already happening. And we've already also determined by vote that there will be a secondary third-party accreditation. Now, do we limit it to either ISO or NELAC? This is the only question here that I'm looking for. Because like I said, we already voted to have both options there. Now, does anybody have any comments directly related to either ISO or NELAC or both? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and look for consensus then to allow both. If you are opposed to allowing both, please raise your hand.
At present, we have no hands raised.
Okay, cool. So then based on that, I think we have voted to allow all three pathways that we have here, either NELAC, ISO, or the state-run product. The state-run. Excuse me, I'm having trouble finding my words today. Yes, I think you all get it. Validation for our laboratories. So let's move on to required testing panels. Okay. So I've got a couple thoughts on testing as far as our product goes. You know, we've talked about quite a bit how there's only one lab currently in Colorado and one lab in Oregon testing all of these products, all of their products. So I think it's going to be really hard for New Mexico to run a successful program with that. And I also think that we're trying to minimize regulation on cultivators. So my thought process is that we really test our products on the back end, so that way, you know, we know we're providing a safe product, and we know we're giving them accurate dosing, and we can help labs stay afloat with that additional testing as well. But that allows us to keep regulation slim on the cultivation side, I feel like. But I'll open this up for comment as far as that thought process, and you hopefully all can see kind of the tests that we have. I've kind of brainstormed here, and what other tests might we need? What seems too excessive? Comments on this part.
And Chris, before everyone starts, this was something that also I had in my notes, but had not added in from some of the previous items, which was that the department can stagger the implementation of the testing as the laboratories are permitted. So in other words, as they actually get their licensing, and that they're able to provide the validation of testing. That way, we can actually stagger that a little bit so that cultivators are not overburdened by additional testing. And if it ends up that in sample tests, for example, some of the tests are not necessarily needed, then they can actually be addressed in future rules. if that makes sense.
So you're saying that all of these tests may not be immediately necessary and that there would be some sort of prioritization there. And then as the
Correct.
program comes into full, we would have full testing unless we determine that some of these are not necessary.
Correct.
Okay.
And would it then address those in future rulemaking to delete them out, for example, or add in if we find others need to be added?
Let's go to Dan, or who had their hand up first? I'm sorry.
I believe it was James. James, I have enabled your microphone. Please begin when ready.
Hey, thank you, James Blackford. I'm just going to speak on two of the points. The first is going to be as far as the, sorry, it keeps, as far as the, if the product is older than 6 months, it needs to be retested. There's a lot more people with a lot more knowledge on this, but just in a little bit of general search, it seems like there's nothing really conclusive as far as when the potency would start to break down to where it might need to be retested for accuracy. I mean, I've seen numbers all the way from, 1 to 5 years, if stored properly, that it would still be effective, especially in a homogenized state. So be that there's not, a ton of conclusive data or none that I'm aware of, I would vote to just move it to a year as opposed to 6 months, if stored properly. And then the other point, no, I think that was it. That was my only point to this, I believe.
Thank you. We also have Dan there with a hand up.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused with the way it's written, and maybe it should just be clarified. It says no cultivation or processing facility will be asked to test more than 4 times a year with regards to the random testing. So I think you have to figure out or define what is going to be under that, because you talked about batches earlier and how batches need to be tested. And what the definition of a batch was. So is it basically, I think what you're trying to go for is the potency testing is for every batch, but then contaminant testing maybe is what you're going for the random. It just probably help clarifying that. Because yeah, every batch should be tested for potency. And then on the year and 6 months and year, that you guys decide what to do there. Yes, if it's stored under proper conditions, it can last more than a year. And even what we've found is that if it breaks down in that time frame, the total equivalent psilocybin content still is the same. It's just you lose psilocybin and it converts to psilocin is what we found. And the hardest, it's easier to store improperly if it's whole fungi versus homogenized fungi because of the oxidation that can happen with with all the sides and all that for each of those particles that are homogenized. So it can convert. You guys would probably just have to identify what proper storage is, or maybe not. I don't know.
I think the comment there about no cultivation or processing facility will be asked to test more than 4 times a year. That's just to protect cultivators if, say somebody doesn't like them and keeps requesting additional testing on their products. So I think most of the testing would be required on all batches, but this would just be kind of towards validation testing. And is that your interpretation too, Dominic?
Yeah, what the reason for that particular phrase, the no cultivation or processing facility will be asked to test more than 4 times a year with regard to the random testing. And so what random testing is say we go out to do a site visit. So the department goes to do a site visit and we are going to pull a random sample. What we're saying, in order to not increase the cost or have undue cost towards the cultivators, we are putting in a protection for the cultivators that we would not be able to do that any more than 4 times a year. So we could only do that 4 times in a given year. The exception is if there are contaminants or false statements made by the organization, that sort of a thing. So we could only go in and do that random testing. And the reason for that is a protection for the cultivators so that we don't have somebody who, say, for example, down the road, we're 10 years into this, and we have a regulator who, for whatever reason, just doesn't like a particular cultivator, and that they just go in and they essentially are harassing them and picking on them and saying, we're going to go ahead and test you every month. And that's what that is for, is so that it's not just protections towards the department, but in this case, protection for the cultivator, so that they are not potentially subject to harassment. I would like to say that the entire world always operates in the best of ways possible, but we all know that sometimes there are concerns and issues. And so this was actually something that I put in specifically to protect cultivators from that sort of overreaching situation. I hope that answers that question for you, Dan. And then a couple of questions just in the chat as far as homogeneity testing requirements. Yes, that actually happens once the batch is homogenized. That is what is required for all of them, and that does include the potency, the contaminant, the heavy metals, etc. So, yeah.
We have Shane McDaniel, their hand up. Please go ahead. I see you might be having some technical issues there. It seems your mic is unmuted, but there could be a technical issue on your side. What we can do is, if you want to jump off the call and maybe come back, that often does resolve the issue. Alternatively, you could always call. I believe the number can be provided in the, is it in the chat?
We'll get it in just a moment, Ishmael.
Not a problem. But yeah, if once you're in the, if you do decide to call, you can raise your hand there and then press star 6 if I'm correct, and that's how you unmute. In the meantime, we have Gregory Evans. Gregory, your mic has been unmuted, sorry, allowed, so you have to unmute, but go ahead.
The only point I wanted to consider is instead of using 4-ACO DMT, we could switch that language to be future-proof by saying synthetic tryptamine screening. Because
I'm sorry, Greg, I'm having a little hard time hearing you. Can you just put that in the chat?
Yep, I will do.
Thank you for that. And Shane is back on the call. Shane, I have enabled your microphone. Please unmute and go ahead. Seems you may still be experiencing some technical issues there. Dominic has provided the phone number in the chat, so if you do wish to call in and provide your comment, that is also a possibility. So just for your reference there, the number is on screen.
So I did catch some of what Gregory was saying. He was talking about the 4-ACO DMT and yeah, switching it to a synthetic tryptamine screening. I don't know how involved that would be, but that does seem super reasonable to me, considering, you know, we would want to make sure that we're giving a clean product.
And I've made that change in the outline. Thank you. I was missing the middle word. I couldn't understand what you were saying there, Greg. And I just figured rather than having you repeat it multiple times, chat would make it work.
We also have Dan with their hand up there, and we can give Shane another go after Dan's comment.
Okay, Shane was first, but that's so when it comes to the pricing here, I love everything I see here as a laboratory. If I was a manufacturer grower, I would be upset a little bit. So that's just a comment. Psilocybin testing should be going for about $125. Contaminant microbiology testing, just so you guys know, should go for about $100 or maybe 80, 90, 100, somewhere in there. The metals testing is about $150. Pesticides, fungicides is about $150. Residual solvents is about $80, $90. And then synthetic tryptamines, that one there is a tricky one because there's so many out there and people are changing, or they keep finding new molecules and changing molecules to change it just a little bit. The only way I can say to economically do that as a laboratory is what we call a GCMS scan. And we currently charge about $250 for that. It scans the product that you're trying to test and then overlays that over an international database, which there's always new uh, elements or compounds being added all the time. And then it just says, yes, these are here, or no, they're not. But to be able to buy all the standards and calibrate and do all that to actually test each and all of them synthetic compounds is going to be a little bit much for a laboratory if they don't just do a GCMS scan.
Thanks for sharing that. We also have Gregory Evans with their hand up. But before you go, Gregory, let's see, Shane's hand is down. However, I don't believe they're in the chat anymore, actually. Okay, yeah, go ahead, Dan. Sorry, or Gregory.
Yeah, I mean, if Shane pops in, just let me know. Definitely want to hear what he has to say. I'm not sure what's wrong with my mic, but I'll try to speak up. Curious, this is more of a question for Dan. Is there any consolidation of panel testing that we could just cover by having a GCMS that like uncovers multiple sections of the HPLC panel that you first described?
A GCMS scan is not quantitative, so it doesn't actually come up with actual potency results. So we can see psilocybin and psilocin in it, but again, we can't tell you how much psilocybin or psilocin. We just see peaks. And that's so the GCMS scan is just is it there or is it not there? And it doesn't tell you how much or how little is there. So I don't really think the GCMS scan would be very beneficial for some of these others. I would have to ask my chemist about the metals. I'm thinking that those might not show up because how sensitive it is, especially the lower limits. And that's where, I mean, I wouldn't be happy as a lab because we only test potency out here in Oregon and then species identification. I don't agree with the species ID because it only identifies cubenzas, but that's all that we're allowed to test as a laboratory. And that's why there's only one laboratory, is because there's no real testing regimen. But to add all of this could be for every batch, could be kind of cumbersome, but for the growers and could definitely increase the pricing, but will definitely, I can guarantee you'll end up with more than one laboratory if you do require all this for every batch.
Can you walk me through one more time how Oregon deals with heavy metals, E. coli, like microbial contamination, pesticides, and all that? Is it like random testing for contaminants, or like walk me through that because I seem to be forgetting.
There is no requirements. There's no random testing. There's no nothing. It's if it's not in the regulation, then we don't worry about it. So we don't, I guess, care about metals and E. coli and salmonella and all that, and pesticides, or solvents. Solvents, I kind of, if it's a homogenized product and that's all you guys are going with, I don't know, I don't see that solvents would be involved in that, homogenized only. Solvents would be more if there's edibles or concentrates allowed on the market, in my opinion. But yeah, we don't test, we don't care. We just care about the potency, that's it. Oh, and the unreliable species ID.
We don't have to deal with species ID, which is great. But I would love to consider what you're talking about. And if we could remove some of the contaminant testing, that would be a relief of burden.
Well, I don't think you should remove it, but maybe this is where you turn around and decide that, hey, maybe just the metals and pesticides, maybe just those two, for example, which cost roughly $300. Maybe they just do that a couple times a year or something. I don't know, just in case, and if something happens or pops. I mean, if they're growing on a media, they test once and they test negative, they're probably going to continue to test negative for metals and pesticides, but well, at least for metals, because the material they're growing on should be consistent. Yeah, the synthetic screening, if it's just homogenized product, in order to end up with synthetic material or synthetics on it, you would have to spray or squirt stuff on it to adulterate it. But yes, that could happen. I don't know. I think a lot of this should stay, especially E. coli, coliform. But just how often may be the question. Maybe a coliform E. coli's or E. coli's is every batch, or I don't know, once a month. Currently here in Oregon, we do species ID, for example, only once a month, as just an example.
So, I really do think the success of this program relies on us having more than one lab doing this. And so we do, and I do think we also have been very lax on the cultivation requirements. So I do think more back-end testing is required to ensure the safety of for people. So I would like to find some middle ground here. Maybe we only do heavy metals, one time a year.
Yeah, like call it random sampling for compliance.
I wouldn't necessarily say random sampling for compliance, because I think that takes away from DOH's process. I would think that once a year, your cultivators could just submit that sample, whether it be their first batch of every year needs to be submitted, or maybe that gives it too many loopholes. Let's try to go back to Shane again, and let's try to bring this back into a little bit more orderly environment. So please raise your hand if you would like to speak. Go ahead, Shane.
And Shane, it is showing that your microphone is live, but we are not hearing anything. So it is showing that you're unmuting. We just do not then hear you.
Shane, if you take a look on the right side of your microphone, there's a downwards arrow. There's an option in the lower end for the choice of microphone. Perhaps it's just a case of choosing the right one.
How about now?
Yeah.
There we have
There
it.
you go. We can hear you.
Thanks for helping me figure that one out. I thought I did that in my settings, but I guess when I switched it, but I didn't save it or something. I don't know. And anyways, it's working. So I beat this horse in just about every meeting we've had. But the more testing we do, the more random testing, and I'm assuming random testing will be at the expense of the cultivator. I don't think the state's going to come in and say, hey, we're going to test you and we're going to pay for it. Dominic, you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but we'll continue to add more testing, and it's just going to bring the prices up. And that's what I thought everybody kind of agreed on, that we want to keep these prices down as affordable for everybody, not just and go down the route that Oregon and Colorado did, where only the people that can afford $5,000 for a treatment can receive the medicine. I do agree that we need to test to ensure safe medicine, that the medicine has been grown responsibly and that there's no contaminants. But with regard to potency and all that, if somebody has a strain that they're or a cultivar that they're gonna try to sell on the market in New Mexico, that when they try to bring in that cultivar, test that cultivar one time, the potency is not going to change much over time. And all potency should be required for is so that those that are prescribing or providing the medicine to the client can have a better understanding of what the dose needs to be, right? Depending on the cultivar, the potency can be different, right? So saying 5 grams, and we've said that a bunch of times, is not, and I agree, saying 5 grams is not the same if you're talking about say Golden Teacher, or compared to Tidal Wave or Shakti, or some of the more potent psilocybes. So we're talking a lot about testing, but we're not don't seem to be including that's going to cost a lot of money, and we need to try to reduce cost as much as we can. If I'm wrong, call me out on it, but anytime I've made comments about keeping the price down, it seems like everybody is giving me the thumbs up and clapping and hearts, but then when we go to talking about all this other stuff, we just keep adding more cost to the cultivators, to where they're going to have to charge a lot. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, so on that end, I think we have stripped most of the regulation that we initially came for the cultivators, and we've tried to allow them as much leeway to run business how they want to keep costs down. I've talked to people in both Oregon and Colorado where there's only one lab per state, and this is a big state, so they're not able to shop their labs. So there's basically a monopoly of both states, which increase costs. And then there's extra transportation costs. So if we can shift those costs towards making a safer product that is more locally available and have more than one lab, which then we can also help validate our potency testing and make sure that we're giving a safe product and an appropriate product, is the juice not worth the squeeze there? Does anybody else have any comments on this? Gregory. Can we go to Gregory, please?
Gregory, your mic is enabled. I don't think they're able to unmute for some reason there. Gregory, if you're experiencing any technical issues, please do drop a line in the chat. Otherwise, let us know if perhaps it may have been a mistake in raising your hand. If not, just let us know. In the meantime, Chris, back to you.
Was there another comment or just the one?
I believe it was just the one. Let's take a look. Dan provided a comment. Potency needs to be for every batch and provided a link.
I agree with that. Potency needs to be tested for every batch. And I also want to keep costs down as much as I can, but I do not think we can get a successful program with one laboratory in this whole state. It's going to cause problems. Go ahead, Dominic.
And maybe this will help a little bit. So, and I was paying attention, Dan, when you were talking about how much the different tests cost. Even if we left and remained all of these tests on in, we would be talking at just around $1,000, give or take a little bit. And that includes the testing for the synthetics that you were talking about, Dan. And what that really comes to is it comes to about $1 a gram. When we look at the batches being up to the 1 kilogram. So that actually does make it something that, yes, it is a little bit of an expense, but it's not a lot of expense. So if you're thinking about what most doses are going to be, yes, it's adding a few dollars to it, but it is not an exorbitant amount to add it on in. And again, remember, we're going to be looking, especially in the first year, at evaluating this to ensure that if there are tests that it ends up are unnecessary, that we are taking it down, and looking at all of that aspect. And yes, it does reduce it on down or it does increase the cost if they are small batches. But part of what we have to make sure is we also have to make sure that all of the products that are being taken are safe. And I know a lot of people want to talk about, oh, well, people have taken this for centuries without having any issues. But that doesn't necessarily mean there weren't issues. It just means that there are not things that are reported moving forward. And this is going to be evolving. But one bad reaction can shut the entire program down. And so I just want to put that out there that, if we are doing things and things are a little bit more strict in the very beginning, especially from a safety standpoint, we have to do that because part of our, at least as the department, is that we have to ensure this is as safe as possible. And so that's a part of it. So looking at this, the testing that is here, I think the question really comes down to, are we looking at it from a standpoint of safety or just cost? We need to try to balance it as much as possible. And that is a part of why we also suggested, as far as for the department to be able to stagger the implementation, so that if the cost does become a problem and we're not seeing, for example, issues with heavy metals and other items, that we can actually pull those from the requirements because they are not things that are being seen, if that makes sense.
Well, I see your comment, Shane, that cost is for larger cultivators, but that's also why we had the batch conversation and we limited it to a kilogram. And perhaps we should have limited it more, but this is why we have to engage through all parts of this. Dan, I think you had a comment.
Yeah, I see GE has his hand up. Gregory.
Is
No,
Greg
not
able
anymore.
Yeah. Dan, you are next in line here. Mike is enabled as you're speaking already.
Okay. So just thank you, Dominic, for that. It is a minimal cost for the batches. If you're doing full batches, definitely minimal cost. The cost out here in Oregon, the reason stuff is so expensive is the licensing. It's $10,000 for me, $10,000 for a service center, blah, blah, blah. Now, just to give everybody an idea of equipment cost, potency machine, you're looking about $20,000. Microbio is probably $10,000 worth of equipment. Heavy metals, you're looking at about $150,000. I just bought a new heavy metal machine for $136,000. Pesticides, you're looking at about $400,000 for a piece of equipment. Solvents, about $120,000. And you can do the tryptamines with that same 120,000. But again, I don't know, Solvents, yeah, that's a questionable one, but yes, just so you guys understand equipment cost and what it's going to take a laboratory to get up and running.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Gregory, can you unmute now?
Greg, your mic has been enabled.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm moonlighting and had to have a separate conversation. I had a really good conversation with Chris Pauley this afternoon and talking about this very thing around what is creating the costs. And I don't know what I missed, so please stop me if I'm just like parodying what Dan and other people have said. But in both Oregon and Colorado, it costs thousands of dollars to do a test because there is, like in Colorado specifically, you can't do recreational and the official program, the state level program. Like you can do one or the other. So if you're gonna do the state regulated program, you can't do anything else. And there's only like, you know, a very minimal amount of product going through the system simply by allowing scope extension for cannabis testing labs that already have that equipment, or at least the majority of the equipment in place. We are just sidestepping those exorbitant costs. Like, I see what you've done, Dominic, and I respect it so much. Thank you. Because like this is what will allow us to have accessible pricing. Like if I grow a batch, whatever that batch is, it's a reasonable amount of money to spend $300, $500 on testing. Period. So I think we're there. We're not making it insane.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Gregory.
hopefully some of the equipment has already been acquired and can be cross-used for our cannabis program. But if I remember right, Dominic, we had a conversation about heavy metals and that our cannabis wasn't tested for any heavy metals. Is that correct?
No, actually, it is, Chris. But the point you make about with regard to the equipment, that was a part of the reason for having the current and allowing for testing laboratories that are already permitted for and licensed for cannabis, because they already will have that equipment. Some other small items may be necessary, but they'll already have the majority of the equipment. So there's not as much of that startup cost. It also, by allowing it to be essentially thinking of it as another testing line for those laboratories, is it helps reduce what their overhead costs are overall. So it's not a standalone laboratory that's having to do just the psilocybin testing.
Excellent. And without permitting fees that Colorado and Oregon are facing, we're also reducing costs from those programs as well.
Correct. And just as a note for the cannabis testing labs, their current permitting fees are 25, pardon me, I may be off slightly. It's either 2,500 or 3,500 for the application fee, and then $1,000 per location. So it essentially comes to about, it's either 3,500 or 4,500. So we are not going to have an additional fee on top of that for psilocybin.
Well, and I agree with Greg that we shouldn't recommend that laboratories can't test outside product, right? That's not in the current or the recommendations anywhere that I see.
Yeah, we're not actually limiting that, but it still would not be legal for them to do so, as psilocybin will only be available through the program at this current time. So,
excellent. All right, let's go through this section by section. The first 3 bullets, I think maybe we can get consensus. Does anybody have any issue or comment with changing it to 1 year instead of 6 months? Does anybody, all right, let's say, does anybody think it should be different than a year? higher, lower? All right, let's say by consensus. If I see no objection, we'll change that to a year. Are there any other issues with those first 4 bullets there? And then we'll get into potency testing. Okay. So we'll call those first 4 bullets. We have consensus on that. Let's go to potency testing, and obviously we're going to test psilocin and psilocybin. Do we need to test baeocystin, norbaeocystin, and I'm not going to try to say the last word.
And
Who
Chris,
is-
what I would
Yes.
actually ask, just from a timing standpoint, could we go through this and just see if people have any objections to them? And I'm putting it in the chat so that you don't have to pronounce it, because I can't pronounce it either.
Does anybody have any objection to these 3? I'm
We do
kind of
have one hand.
questionable on them. Go ahead.
We had one hand. Oh, he put his hand down. Oh, Greg. Greg can't make him. Greg, your mic has been enabled. Speak when you're ready.
I was just going to pronounce arugination for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Greg.
Arugination.
Arugination.
Thanks for that, Greg.
I'll forget by the next meeting.
Yeah.
This is one set of tests I'm kind of on the fence for. I don't know that there's a ton of actual scientific evidence. I know there's a lot of anecdotal evidence from what I've heard. But, and you know, this is something we may add in the future. That's why I wanted to kind of bring these 3 up individually. Let's, Dan, go ahead.
We do have one hand up. For a moment, we did.
Okay.
Dan, do you want to keep your hand? Okay, here we go. Dan, your mic has been enabled.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of scientific data on this. A lot of anecdotal data on the 3 compounds you mentioned. As a laboratory standpoint, it is minimal cost to me and doesn't really increase my workload at all to add them. And I just am a proponent for more data. And even if we can't use the data, or if we don't know what it does now, maybe it could be compiled with IA or AI and all this other stuff to help us in the future. Anyway, so yeah, my 2 cents.
Thank you, Dan.
Excellent.
So we have
Gregory?
Gregory Evans. Oh, Gregory, I forgot that your mic needs to be enabled. There we have it.
On a tight leash. I think it's worth, or my opinion is they're vitally important. And I could give you 100 pages of writing, which probably would not be well received. But I would recommend that we defer to the research committee and the standards and dosage committee for their opinion on this matter.
All right. Based on the essentially no cost difference that Dan is saying, and those arguments, I'm in agreement that we should leave them in. I think there's one more comment by James Brown, but just please, let's keep our comments brief. We got a lot to try to get through in a short amount of time.
James, your mic has been enabled.
Thank you. And, I just want to bring up the word entourage effect again. Very big believer of that. We need to keep all these current regulations and standards right now across Oregon and Colorado are including these. So let's get on board, include them. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. All right. So by consensus then, is anybody opposed to keeping these 3 in? All right. Seeing no opposition, we'll keep those, and we'll move on to microbial contamination. Then E. coli and salmonella testing. Is there any opposed to that? And are we just
At present,
yeah,
no hands.
excellent. Okay, how about heavy metal testing? Seeing none, we'll move on to pesticides and fungicides. And finally, the one that Dan said might not be required was residual solvents. Who thinks we should keep that in, or should we, or I'm sorry. People who are opposed to residual solvents being tested for, please raise your hand.
At present, we have 4 hands raised. 5, my apologies.
Excellent. Okay. I think
6. 7, 8.
I think we have overwhelming consensus then. Let's go ahead and lower your hands. If anybody would like to be on the record as dissenting to that decision, please raise your hand now.
So we have Brett Phelps with their hand up. Brett, oh, no, they've lowered it.
Yeah, sorry, I was just putting it down from the last one. I'm good. I'm good with getting rid of the solvents.
Okay.
And then what are we thinking about synthetic tryptamine screening? Are we gonna keep that in a randomized area? That seemed like it was going to be potentially a big, expensive one. I don't know how often. I know like that occurs a lot in the head shops with the chocolates and various things. It's all over the place. I don't know how often it would occur in our products. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, that was my exact question. Do we know in Oregon and Colorado, has there been a single instance of like synthetic tryptamines being used in place of psilocybin? I don't know. Seems I get the caution, but I think that's something that is way more prevalent or way more of a concern in the unregulated market. So it seems like a really unnecessary cost to me, unless there's been proof that that's happening in other places. That's my thoughts.
Any other thoughts on that? Dan?
Here in Oregon, we haven't really tested the legal market for synthetic tryptamines. I find it difficult to believe that people would be adding adulterants like that, but it doesn't mean that somebody wouldn't. So it seems like it would have to be sprayed on or applied in a way, or maybe ground in with it. We haven't really tested it. So that's my 2 cents.
We also have Dan there with their hand up.
There's a couple. Oh, Dan, go ahead. Oh, we just talked to Dan, right?
I think so. My apologies.
Okay. Looks like there's a couple of comments in the chat saying that this might not be necessary. And as always, the department would be able to test for these things if there was any type of suspicion. Correct, Dominic?
What I could say is, because you hit on a really good point on that, Chris, and I was actually about to raise my hand to bring it on up, is what if we change that language to the synthetic tryptamine screening upon the request of the department in case there is an issue, just so that it is there and it is specific in case there is concern about it being a potential contaminant down the road. Does that sound like it's good? I'm seeing some thumbs up on that.
She
Okay.
thumbs up everywhere. Do we have any dissent to that option? Okay, we'll go ahead and proceed with that. And I think that last comment we've already kind of talked about. Is there any issues with the department staggering implementation of testing as they are permitted? Okay, then we'll consider all of item B in section 6 to be approved by consensus. And let's move on to item C, which is pretty simple. I think the only part that we might need to adjust on this is language to kind of comply with that last little bullet point in section B. But does anybody have any issue with this section? Seeing Dan saying that maybe we should have a time frame for when it's released. And that kind of brings up a good question. We authorized retesting at a year, but when does that year date start? When it's the batch is released, or from test date, probably. Who's got their hand up?
Dan does.
Go ahead, Dan.
So basically, if the retest after a year should be from a year from the original test date, if that's what is pretty simple there. And then the staggering of it, what I mean is, if you're going to allow a laboratory to come on and only test for like potency is what I'm understanding at first, and then slowly bring on pesticides or metals or the other tests, is when I think it should be a time frame. And if that's not what you meant by staggering implementation of testing, then I'm sorry.
Yeah. Dan, it's actually just so that as they get up online, if they, for example, wanted to start with potency, but they have not yet validated their, some of the contaminant testing, then the department could say, yes, you can do the potency, but not the contaminant until you validate it. And so really kind of allowing for that aspect where they can start up and do parts of the test, but not necessarily all.
That's all good, but my caution is, if you guys do end up with one laboratory and all they really bring on is potency and don't ever really bring on the other tests, then that's what you guys are going to be stuck with. So maybe there should be something like, if you're going to be doing this, you should maybe after a year or something be able to do all the testing, or I don't know, maybe not. It's your call.
I think the intention of that is to have the test up and running as quickly as possible, but we just might have a little bit of lag time, especially in that first year. Is that your thinking, Dominic?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And then, as I was just going to say, Chris, for this next part, what we really have on this is it's really just about making sure that any producer is actually following food preparation requirements, such as food safety and handling through like environmental health, and that they're not exempted from those safety requirements because they are producing a product that will be ingested.
Okay. So I'm thinking what we might do is save food handling for our meeting on the 18th and just have cleanup time on that. Okay. And perhaps we can post this into that meeting. Who am I supposed to talk to? Is that Adrian or Is that Johnny?
We'll get it. We'll get it posted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perhaps we can have that whole section and maybe the definition section selected for that meeting. And that way people can kind of come with comments and we'll clean up those sections as needed, but I think they should be kind of boilerplate at that point.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of scrolling through them.
Sure. And I just put them all in the chat for people, just so you can see, because there's a fair bit over a couple of pages. A lot of it is that I've just included in, as well as the labeling section, which is really just about, what should the labels require, make sure that it has information like the type of product, the species name, quantity of the contents using metric system, potency of the psilocybin analytes, identification number, which will come through the system itself, expiration date, and then some statements such as the risk benefit, drug interactions, and effects of psilocybin are not fully understood. Individual results may vary. And the statement keep out of the reach of children. And then, of course, do not drive a motor vehicle or operate machinery while under the use of psilocybin. So, all of those usual standard warnings. And then on the product information document, which this would be a document that would be provided to the patient, could either be printed or electronic. So like, for example, could use a QR code that the person could read on their phone, all of that. So it would have the requirements of what is on the product label. And this is where also that statement that we had discussed before about how many years the business has been established in New Mexico and the residency of the primary investors. And then results of all laboratory tests, the date of the homogenization in the tests, type and composition of the growth medium used, including type of grain, soil, compost, other inputs, essentially those sort of things. I'm not going to go through everything on it, but it's really essentially making sure that the items are, that these items have that information for the patient to be able to evaluate and determine, is this a product that I want to take?
Yes, excellent. And let's go back. I think there was a section earlier that we did not kind of approve because we were waiting on something. Are we ready to approve section 3, Dominic?
Section 3. The permit structure. Yeah, I think what we had just decided was, so for the initial phase, what the permits are just required for is that they are doing cultivation, harvest, processing, and packaging. Processing is, of course, things like the homogenization and all of that. It's one permit. This is not, and again, there is not a fee for this. It is just one permit. It's just that that's what the permit is required for. And but if there is, for example, someone, one of the companies is like a smaller company that doesn't want to do the packaging and wants to pass that to someone else, then they'd have the ability to do that. And to demonstrate, they would then have to just demonstrate that the psilocybin mushrooms are kept in a secure location. And these are just examples of items. Oh, sorry.
I think you were waiting for some, because I'm pretty sure we went through all of that portion. It was the agricultural section that there was an issue with.
Oh, down here. Gotcha. Right on there. So far we have not gotten that that there is a specific New Mexico Department of Agricultural license that is needed, but that we do want to include that they should utilize the pest and contamination mitigation guidance that they do put out. So that contamination in part includes the pesticides issue, and that essentially that production is treated analogously to controlled environment agriculture.
Okay, and I see.
And that was, the still seeking information. Thank you. Sorry, here I am jumping ahead of myself on some of those other points. So Thank you, everybody.
Don't worry, sorry to interrupt you.
No, please do. If I'm going on duplicate, of course do. We've been looking, of course, at all these things, so sometimes I forget what we've reviewed.
Me too. I think we have a comment from somebody.
Indeed. James, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I did have a question as far as the city and county planning zoning departments, as far as land use approval, conditional use of permits. The question for that is because the mushrooms would be grown inside and not actually in the soil, inland, outside, and I may be misunderstanding this, would there still need some type of additional land approval? I'm not familiar with that process. I'm sure there's something, for growing marijuana, it's outside, it's in a field, I assume, or whatever, would be different than mushrooms inside of a building essentially. So I just had some questions on that if we could get clarification.
Sure. So James, and I can answer that. And what I'm told, and I am not a lawyer, so just to make that clear, is that's really just as far as if there are approvals for specific zoning or use of buildings. So land is not just as far as like agricultural, we're growing in the soil sort of situation. It's also that that area is zoned for the appropriate purpose. And so, for example, within a residential zone, only certain things are allowed. Within business districts, certain things are allowed. Different cities and counties have different definitions for that. And so this would just be that the cultivator, the producer would have to ensure that their application does indeed meet those approvals within the local city and county planning and zoning regulations. And again, those are different in different cities, municipalities, counties, and some are outside of those. So that's what that is. It's not specifically about growing in soil or not growing in soil.
Okay, would a condition of getting a permit, we would have to include what the conditions are in our particular, say, county, or would that be like on the due diligence of the person applying type of thing?
It's basically a part of when applying for those business licenses, that's part of what is required at that time. So you have to declare what your business is and have to get appropriate approvals from those city and county planning and zoning departments.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for that clarification. Thanks.
I think we have a comment from Shane too.
Yes.
Yeah. Did we ever come to a consensus on what the law is with respect to growing psilocybin up to but not harvesting it being legal? My understanding, and I talked to a lawyer on this, is that the spirit of that law is to protect anybody who might have natural growing psilocybin on their land, and that you can't prosecute somebody who has naturally occurring psilocybin. But if they were to take that natural growing psilocybin and harvest it, as soon as they harvest it, it becomes illegal. It's not meant to protect somebody that starts it as a spore and grows it in spawn and goes through the whole process, because that's not naturally occurring. I may be wrong on that, but I just want to find out if we've or if any people with much better legal minds than me know what the exact law is around that.
So that's not a question for this program. This is the Medical Psilocybin program, and that this is going to be totally separate than the case law that was established through the New Mexico Supreme Court. And what the intention of that is, I'm not sure, but I don't think that this is the venue to discuss that. So,
well, I was asking so that if anybody right now is already growing to prepare for this before they're licensed, because they think it's legal, we might want to revisit. That's the only. I understand that, yes, we're only doing this for the medical part, but if somebody right now is already growing it we just want to make sure that nobody gets in trouble because I just want to make sure that there's nobody that, has the right intentions, but
I
doesn't
understand.
understand the law.
I understand, Shane, but if you're growing right now, it's not legal under this program. So I think we can leave it at that. Dominic, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I was just going to say we can't provide legal advice with regard to what someone may or may not be doing. We can only discuss what is happening with regard to the program. And right now, it is not legal within the program to be growing psilocybin products. What someone is doing outside, then I would recommend that you reach out to an attorney to talk specifically about it if you have questions, but that is not actually within the purview of the program itself. For example, if we get calls from people who, and this happened a lot with cannabis, by the way, but we get calls from people who say, my neighbor's growing psilocybin mushrooms. Our response is, we are not that type of enforcement agency. You will need to contact your local law enforcement, and then it is in their hands on what occurs at that point. But we don't give that legal definition of whether it is legal for someone to do something or not do something. That is up to those individuals to figure out. I hope that helps.
Okay, I think since we're back in this section again too, I did see that Esteban and a few other people have joined since the beginning of the meeting. So revisiting this real quick, Dominic talked to the legal. Go ahead.
Chris, before we do though, we didn't get a consensus with regard to this on C and D.
Oh, okay. Yes. So is there anything opposing items C and D in section 3? Okay, seeing no opposition, we will consider them approved by consensus during this meeting.
So,
and I believe we had completed all other sections except for B, right?
Yeah, and the only thing with B was the language with regard, I mean, that we needed to talk to. We had actually agreed with the others as far as the business, those types of items. And so now it's just we have to revisit the sunset clause with the New Mexico focused businesses.
Do you want to give a quick brief on that and tell
absolutely. Yeah, so absolutely. So especially to Esteban, because Esteban, first of all, really appreciate the work you had done on this. We did hear back from our attorneys. They did get us the information that unfortunately we are not able to put New Mexico limits, or as far as limits that they have to be residents of New Mexico for the whether it's the 24 or 36 months on that. We're not able to do that because it interferes with the interstate commerce clauses, and that is something that can only be adjusted by the U.S. Congress, not by states individually on this. And so the concern there is that it could be challenged. And there were some challenges to that in other areas here in New Mexico and in other places with regard to it. Not with psilocybin, but in other areas, as I've been informed. And so what we did and what I came up with is, because the intent is to make sure that this is focused on individuals who are in New Mexico, who are established in New Mexico, to make sure that New Mexicans would actually have that ability. So what I had thought might work instead, since we can't actually institute that sort of a sunset clause, is that we do a statement, and I'm going to put it again in the chat, a statement that would go onto the documentation. So on the product information document that states how many years the business has been established in New Mexico, and a statement declaring the state and county of residency, including length of time, of the primary investors. So that way individuals would be able to see that information and be able to look at it and say, I want to choose a New Mexico business versus one that is not. And again, I'm not an attorney. This is just what our attorneys here at the Department of Health have said. We would not be able to include that sunset clause within. And I did run this statement by them, and they said, yes, this is something that we could include in. So just wanted to bring that on up. And of course, I see you have a hand up already, Esteban, but I was going to call on you anyway for your thoughts. So why don't you go ahead, Esteban? Oh, do we have Esteban unmuted? Okay,
He lowered his hand. He lowered his hand.
Oh, but Esteban,
Thank you,
I have
Dominic.
your mic unmuted. There we go.
Okay, wonderful. So, yeah, I guess just my initial question on that is, essentially if we need to look further into how Oregon was able to proceed with that, because like I said, there is precedent establishing this sort of practice already.
So I
So
did
is there
ask
any
that
research that
question.
could support?
Yeah, and it's not about research. It's just that nobody's actually sued them regarding it. And so that's part of why they have been able to get away with that. But as I said, our attorneys did say that there had been other cases in other areas, not with psilocybin specifically, but as far as for limitations like that getting struck down because they interfered with the Commerce Clause.
Okay. Yeah, I guess just my initial concern is, as nice as that label is, people look at dollars, not labels. You know what I mean? So if out-of-state companies in here and offer, prices a quarter to half of what we're offering, there's really no incentive for any New Mexico grower to even be in these meetings,
Well, I do think that it's still having New Mexico growers here is important, because my hope at least is that we do have companies and businesses that are here in New Mexico that do engage in this. And hopefully, and I understand what you're saying as far as not having that protection could potentially be problematic, but unfortunately, I have to go with what our attorneys tell me. Again, as I said kind of before in the other area, I am not an attorney, so I have to rely on others with regard to that. But that is the information that they're providing to me.
Okay. Is there any potential for a further dialogue on that? Because again, I just see the exact same thing happening with this that's currently happening with recreational cannabis, where the majority of money is leaving the state through large corporations.
Yeah, unfortunately, as far as them doing that, they have told me, as far as the attorneys, that we are not able to do that, which is indeed part of the issue with recreational cannabis, was not actually the situation starting out in the very beginning with regard to medical cannabis. And so with this being a medical program, I don't know that that's going to be the same situation as what's occurring with recreational cannabis.
Okay, maybe we could look to have further dialogue on it in our next meeting, because in its current state with just that statement, I would say I probably would not be interested in growing for the program.
Okay, I understand that. Thank you for telling us.
Yeah, I think that's a blow we're all feeling, and hopefully we can find another workaround. Maybe this isn't the space for that though right now. But we'll continue pushing for what we can get. Dan, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I want to be quick. Here in Oregon, everybody that's currently in the market and growing and are facilitators and or whatever are from the state of Oregon. And I don't know if it's because of that clause or not. I don't think so, because technically anybody with money can come in and go, hey, I'll give you X amount of dollars for 49% of your company. And it felt like there was two companies that did come in and try to do something like that, but they quickly went bankrupt and are not in the system. So I think it's and then after Colorado's up and running, I don't see big investment or whatever coming in. I think it's the small guy that stays small and just keeps his head down and does what he does. And first to market is big thing too.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Okay. So I guess, can we find consensus to approve section B. And are we going to put that language in the labeling section, Dominic, or is that going to come into this section?
That language would be in the labeling section.
All right. So unfortunately for now, we have to strike the recommendation for the sunset clause based on the meeting with legal. And let's look to reapprove section B on consensus. Anybody opposed to approval of section B? All right, so I think, okay, Esteban has dissented to approval. Are there any others?
Ash as well.
All right, so seeing 3 hands dissenting. Can you put your hands down, please? Can we see how many hands approve section B? And 4 for approval. We will approve section B, and that concludes the approval for section 3 in its entirety. Where are we at here? We got about 10 minutes left. Yes.
I was just going to say, Chris, I think that's actually a good place to stop, unless there's some other questions or concerns, and then cover that final bit with regard to the labeling and with regard to the labeling. Sorry, here I have to go back down to that section to remember exactly what's in it, and the food preparation and product handling sections in the next meeting.
Okay. Sounds good to me. So like I said, I will set an invite with the remainder of the document that needs to be approved for the next meeting. We're going to have one more virtual meeting on the 18th. And then there's a advisory board meeting where I'll present our initial recommendations on the 27th. And whatever they send back to us, we'll begin to kind of start working on the 4th, and that'll be a hybrid meeting in Albuquerque. And then we'll have a hybrid meeting in Santa Fe on the 11th, location to be determined.
Actually, I think we had said
the 11th.
The 11th and the 18th. I'm sorry. So the hybrid meeting will be on the 11th in Albuquerque, and the one in Santa Fe will be on the 18th. My apologies.
Yeah. And I'll be posting those on the website tomorrow.
Wait. Am I messing this up again? No, that's right.
Nope.
Okay.
You got it right, Chris.
Okay. And so our next meeting will be another virtual one, and we'll discuss food prep, product handling, and labeling. And yeah, we'll talk then about all of those things. Looks like James has a hand up. Can we go to James for comment?
James, your mic is enabled. Please unmute when ready. While they're figuring that out, there's some comments in the chat that I would highlight. Gregory Evans, I think that the reality is that there is very little money to be made. So, and then there's Estevan. Without protections, I cannot in good faith recommend program participation to any on my peers. This really needs to be revisited if the DOH truly cares about local growers. Thank you both for your comments. And James, any attempt there to we're having any issues? Let us know. Maybe drop us a line in the chat if you have any comments. But otherwise, back to you, Chris.
Okay. So we've talked about our future meetings. I don't have anything else. Does anybody else want to bring up any discussion items or food for thought, initial thoughts about the next sections that we're going to be talking about, or about the process in general coming up? I would like to remind everybody that these are initial recommendations that still have to go through the advisory board and then will be then sent to the Department of Health, where the Secretary of Health is the final approving authority. So just because we've determined something here, don't go tell your friends you know the rules that are going to be finalized, because that may not be the case. There's a lot of revision still to be done. Let's go to Dan.
Yeah, last meeting, you guys were mentioning something about there was a huge, massive debate about total potential psilocin or total equivalent psilocybin, and that I think somebody high up or somewhere was recommending or really seriously about pushing total potential psilocin. There's a lot of yes. Here in Oregon, we actually wrote into the laboratory laws as Rose City Laboratories total potential psilocin. And because we thought that that's the compound that gets everybody high and blah, 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 that it makes sense and it's what should be. But years later, people still don't understand and don't comprehend. And in order to make it work right, it's my true belief, 100%, that it needs to be total equivalent psilocybin. And that will be something that can help correlate also with the clinical trials that have ever been done with the synthetic version of it. When they're talking about milligrams of psilocybin, I think it just tracks with everything in history, and it needs to be that way, just because the other way yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and you're not the only one. I've talked to multiple people in Colorado now that say it's causing a lot of confusion and other problems. So I do want to talk about it in our labeling section. So I will modify that portion of the document and make sure we're able to talk about it in the next meeting. But ultimately, the dosage committee, that's what they're pushing for right now. So we'll see what happens, but I think it's a terrible idea, and everybody I've talked to in other states is saying the same thing, that it's causing confusion, and we need to really, in my opinion, to give people informed consent about what they're taking. We need to talk to them in language they understand. So yeah. We'll get into that later, though. Any other comments about upcoming stuff or other proposals that we should consider in that follow-on meeting? Excellent. Well, I think we can go ahead and end there today. Once again, thank you all very much for attending, participating. I appreciate you so much. All of your input is valuable, and I couldn't have done all of this without your all's help. And I think, we're coming along with a good product, although I do think we're rushing it a bit, but we'll keep it moving. So thank you all again.
Thank you, everybody.